Hey everybody, and welcome to a new episode of MazzaOnMets. It's your host Evan Mazza here as we talk all things New York Mets baseball. And there's a lot more questions than answers when it comes to the New York Mets as they, in their latest home stretch, went 1-5 in their latest Homestead, getting swept by the Cleveland Guardians and losing 2 out of 3 to the San Francisco Giants, a San Francisco Giants team that sold at the trade deadline, and a Guardians team that was playing good baseball, and they're now only 6 games back of the division from the Detroit Tigers, but 500 ball club that the Mets really should have beaten, and they got swept by them. And that concluded last night, where the Mets almost got no hit by Gavin Williams of the Guardians. The Mets again, they're now finished 1-5 on this Homestead. They're now 2.5 back of the division title. They are now fallen to the third wild card spot and only three games up on a Cincinnati Reds team that just beat them 2 out of 3 in Citi Field a few weeks ago. So the Mets are now left with a lot more questions than answers and a lot more things that they need to talk about, a lot more things they need to improve on as the second half of the season continues. And the Mets continue to not get really much of anything out of their offense. And I mean, if there was any sort of point in the season where you hope maybe things turn around with this offense and they wake up, it had to have been last night where they almost got no hit by Gavin Williams and were 2 outs away from getting no hit. That was broken up last night by Juan Soto, and a Juan Soto home run. But again, this is where the problems begin. It begins with the top four of the lineup struggling mightily to begin the second half. Guys like Alonso and Lindor have really not hit well at all recently overall, the last 2 months or so. The starting pitching again, not going deep into games. Again, the bullpen having to do a lot of heavy lifting and trying to be perfect. The team also pressing on defense. You could see it. You started a bit on Friday, or you started a bit a few days ago, I should say, against the Cleveland Guardians. This is a team that right now is not playing their best baseball when they got to play their best baseball. And you got Philadelphia. If the Mets don't get out of it, the Phillies might pull away from this division by the end of the month. Before you know it, a division title that you were 5.5, 6.5 up on just 2 months ago, you could be 5.5, 6.5 back by the end of the month, maybe even more. And all of a sudden, the division title is out of range. And remember, the Mets play the Phillies pretty soon. So this is a team. And now the Mets go to Milwaukee, the hottest team in baseball. I know the Mets took 2 out of 3 against them about a month ago. But this is a team that is the hottest team in baseball. They've won 70 games now. They're red hot. This is now another big test for the Mets this weekend, and they got to find a way to get back on track because this is not the way to play baseball if you're the New York Mets. And for a team that with World Series aspirations, this is not ideal at all for the Mets. But we begin with Friday's loss against the San Francisco Giants. The Mets lost this game in extra innings, another tough loss where they left guys in scoring position. They lost 4-3. David Peterson was solid, 6 innings, 4 hits, 2 earned runs, 2 walks, and 4 strikeouts. The Mets went 1-for-7 with runners in scoring position. Edwin Diaz gave up a base hit. Dom Smith in the top of the 10th, which gave the Giants a 4-3 lead going to the bottom of the 10th. And look, in the bottom of the 10th inning, the Mets had the top of the order. They had the top of the order up at the bottom of the 10th with the ghost runner up. And this was also a game where the Mets, again, this was a game, again, the Mets could have won, but they had opportunities and they had the top of the order up. Look, if Edwin Diaz gives up a run in the 10th inning, and you're only down by 1 with the ghost runner rule, you still, especially when you're the home team, you should still be able to find a way to win the game. But they had the top of the order up. Brandon Nimmo pops out. Francisco Lindor gets hit. Soto pops out. And Pete Alonso draws a walk. Ronnie Mauricio strikes out swinging. Top of the order here, in this case, Nimmo and Soto popping up in the same manner. And you look at it here, Brandon Nimmo only took 3 pitches. Only 3 pitches for Nimmo, and he popped out. Just that's it, 3 pitches. Juan Soto, 2 pitches. Where's the working the count? Where's the patience? Where's the waiting for your pitch? Where's the approach? And this is going to be a theme here throughout this show as we recap these games. Where's the approach? Where's the communication? Where's passing the baton over? Where is the consistency? Why is it that with the ghost runner rule and a man on second with nobody out, just down by a run, Is Brandon Nimmo only having a three pitch at bat? Why is Juan Soto? He's the leadoff guy, remember. Why is Juan Soto with two runners on, first and second, and one out, swinging on a pitch that's up and in, on a pitch that's up and in, not even close to a strike? Why is he swinging? That's I'm looking at the graph right now. That's ball two. Actually, look at the graph. It was about the same pitch that he got in the first pitch, but the second pitch was up and in, not a strike, and he's swinging at it. Why? You got to ask why. So the Mets waste that opportunity and they lose a heartbreaker 4-3 to the San Francisco Giants. They bounce back the next day and win 12-6. One of their best offensive performances of the season. Um, they win the game 12-6. Little quick summary here. Pitching wise, Kodai Senga, I believe, pitched this game. I think he did. Yes, he did. Senga struggled again. 4 innings, 5 hits, 4 runs, and 3 walks, 4 strikeouts. He was wild. He was inconsistent. The Mets offense picked them up. They went 8 for 17 runs in scoring position, and they were able to pick them up. Pete Alonso hits a 3-run homer at the bottom of the first to get things started with a 3-0 lead. The Giants then tie the game. Like I said, Senga was inconsistent, struggling with his command. So again, we'll talk about Senga later, but not the start you want to see from him here in August as the Mets are trying to make a push for the playoffs. Giants take a 4-3 lead on a Grant McCray base hit. But then the Mets bounce right back. Nimmo gets an RBI single. Lindor gets an RBI single. They take a 5-4 lead. Nimmo gets another RBI single. Lindor gets another RBI single. 7-4. And the Mets kind of pull away from there. Pete Alonso had a big day in this game. Lindor had a big day in this game. If you look at the combination, Nimmo, Lindor, and Alonso combined for 8 hits on the day. Nimmo 3 hits, Lindor 3 hits, and Pete Alonso with 2 hits. So 6 and 8 hits. They combined for 8 hits. They combined. Lindor had a 4 RBI night. Nimmo had a 3 RBI night. Alonso a 3 RBI day. They combined for 10 RBIs. 10 of the 12 runs were because of 3 of the top 4. Even Juan Soto got a base hit in this game. But 3 of the top 4 guys are responsible for 10 RBIs of the 12 runs. So the Mets get a nice 12-6 win. So here we go. Rubber game of this matchup. The Mets are facing again a young prospect pitcher from the San Francisco Giants, and Wisdom. He had a 4+ ERA coming into the game. Frankie Montez is pitching in this game. At least give you 5 and give you an opportunity. And the Mets get up to an early 1-0 lead thanks to a Francisco Lindor solo homer. And then things fall apart. Montez looks good for the first 2 innings. Then innings 3 through 4, the Giants etch out 4 runs in the third and 3 runs in the fourth. Montez goes 4 innings, 7 earned runs, 2 walks, and 3 strikeouts. And just like that, a Mets 1-0 lead, and they're down 7-1. So, because again, Montez struggling and not having a decent outing and not giving you at least 5 or 6. Montez in the top of the third, he gives up a single to Jung Hoo Lee. Jung Hoo Lee really dominated the Mets in both their series in San Francisco and at Citi Field. Patrick Bailey, an RBI base hit after Jung Hoo Lee steals second, and he goes to third on a fielding error by Francisco Lindor. Again, infield defense. Patrick Bailey drives him in. Rafael Devers hits a home run. It's 4-1. 3-run homer. It's 4-1. Just like that, it's 4-1 Giants. In the next inning, Patrick Bailey reaches on a fielder's choice. It's 5-1. A base hit from Heliot Ramos. It's 6-1. And Rafi Devers gets another RBI single. 7-1. Just like that, the game's over. Game's over, folks, because you have no confidence in the Mets offense to get back in the game. To at least battle back. And it's only in the 4th inning, but with this way this offense is, you have no confidence that they're going to be able to come back. And the Mets ended up losing this game 12-4. They only get 4 runs in this game. They scored 2 runs in the bottom of the ninth, and the Giants scored 5 runs in the top of the ninth as well to kind of the icing there. But that's it. 7-1 in the bottom of the 4th. Game's over because again, you don't really have much confidence in this offense to drive in and score runs because they don't work at bats. They don't. So the Mets lose a series that you should not win. You should not lose the series. Mets lose a series to the San Francisco Giants, a team that sold at the deadline, gave you one of their best relievers in Tyler Rogers. At the trade deadline, they gave you one of their best relievers, or a few days before it, And this is how you respond? You lose 2 out of 3 to them? That's unacceptable, man. You can't lose to the Giants. You can't lose to a team like San Francisco, a team that has nothing, that team that virtually has nothing to play for at this point. And they sold that, and they sold on a few weeks ago or a week ago, including to you. And this is how you respond? But again, another game Friday where you should have won, but you didn't because you weren't able to get the hit. You couldn't get the hit. And the top of the order and the bottom of the 10th. I know Diaz gave up the base hit, but to Dom Smith, but you got to come through there. If Diaz walks into an extra inning game and only in a tie game in the extra innings on the top of the 10th in a home game and only gives up one run, only allows one run, that goes for on second. You got to at least pick him up there because of course he's on second base. It's an unearned run. He's on second base because of the rule. And especially with the top of the order, you got to get one hit, one base hit, and the Mets couldn't do it. Nimmo popped out, Soto popped out, Lindor in between got hit by the pitch. Alonso was able to work out a walk, and it left it all for Ronnie Mauricio, and he unfortunately struck out. So it's just finding a way to get the base hit. So now we head to the series against Cleveland, and here we go, another game. And actually, this is the first of two in a row where you really should have won. And you had your opportunity, you had a chance to win, had your opportunities to win, but you didn't win. Why? Because you couldn't get the hit. You couldn't get the big hit. This one was an adventure on Monday night when they lost to the Guardians 7-6. Um, Again, you go to the starting pitching staff. Sean Manaea, boy, Sean Manaea cruised for 4 innings. He cruised for five innings. He cruised. Excuse me, for 5 innings he cruised. He looked like he was going to pitch a 6 or 7 inning shutout, and then he gave up a 5-run 6 inning. And if that doesn't show you what is the state of the Mets pitching, it's always the one bad inning from the starters. The one bad inning, right? Montez had 2 bad innings, Senga having a couple of bad innings, but it's always really that one bad inning. Sean Manaea cruising for 5 innings, cruising. You throw him out for the sixth, and he got rocked for a 5-run 6 inning. It leaves you puzzled, but this is how the Mets pitching has been lately. In the top of the sixth, he gives up a base hit to Stephen Kwan, who had a great series. He hits Angel Martinez. And then after a flyout by Jose Ramirez, a wild pitch to advance the runners. Angel Martinez went to second. David Fry then drives. David Fry again had a big series. He gets an RBI single. Carlos Santana gets an RBI single. And then Gabriel Arias gets a 3-run homer to make it 5-0 Cleveland. And again, normally here you would think the game is over because again, do you trust the Mets offense? It's hard. But the Mets are able to make a comeback. And this is where this loss stings. Because they came right back in this one. Down 5-0 in the middle innings, and they came right back. Got a little lucky. Lindor got on base on a strikeout hit by a pitch in the bottom of the sixth. Juan Soto reached on an error. And Pete Alonso, so 2 guys reached because of some mistakes by the Guardians. And Pete Alonso capitalized with a 3-run homer. Hey, just like that, it's 5-3. That's all you need. All you need is your big boppers, your top 4. The core 4, as Stephen Cohen or whatever he called them, the Fab 4, whatever he called them. Shortly before the All-Star break. But you need these guys. The stars need to play like stars. And these 4 have not played like stars, including Nimmo. They have not played like stars in the last really since the second half of the season. Really, for Soto, it's since the second half of the season began. For Lindor, it's been since he broke his toe in Colorado. For Alonso, it's been for almost 2 months now. Nimmo, it's now been a month or so. These guys have not played like stars. So Alonso hitting the 3-run homer to get you back in the game, that's what you want to see. That's what you want to see. That's a good thing to see there. So it's 5-3 Cleveland. Alonso gets the hit, gets the 3-run homer. And the Mets top of the 7th, Tyler Rogers comes in. He holds the Guardians at bay. So now we get to the bottom of the 8th. We'll fast forward to the bottom of the 8th, still 5-3. Lindor gets a base hit. Soto gets a base hit. Alonso drives them in with a base hit. Jeff McNeil gets a base hit. Mark Vientos gets a sac fly, ties the game 5-5. That's what you like to see. You don't need to hit home runs. Just got to get base hits. Just get base hits and get some sac flies or whatever. Put the ball in play. So it's 5-5. And this is where the Mets get a bit of hard luck. Cedric Mullins comes to the plate. He hits a he hits what would have been a go-ahead two-run single, but Brian Rocchio makes a nice play to stop it and to get the second out. And that nothing you can do there. Cedric Mullins hit a let me see the exit deal on this one. You know, so well only 79.6, but still he had a good one. That was a base hit through the hole, and it would have scored 2 runs, giving the Mets a 7-5 lead, and really could have been, and that would have been the win. But just tip your cap up to Brian Rocchio. He made a great play, saved the game for the Guardians. And then Brett Beatty comes up. He hits a ground out. So that was an inning where they tied the game, but you should have had the lead. But nice play by Rocchio to keep it tied. Game remains tied until the bottom until the uh, game remains tied, and then we hit the ninth inning. And again, this is where this team has lacked the clutch hit. This is where they lack the clutch hit. Alvarez gets a start with a base hit. Tyrone Taylor, you guys know this. Tyrone Taylor comes in the pinch run. Brandon Nimmo with a man on first, Taylor on first. He is not able to get the runner in. But Brandon Nimmo had a really rough day at the plate on this game. I believe this was the game where he struck out 4 times. Was that the next game? Was that the next game? No, this was the game. uh, Nimmo struck out 4 times in this game. He strikes out. He strikes out again in the ninth inning. Not able to move the runner up. So then Francisco Lindor, against his old team, almost for the second time in 3 years, looks like he's going to walk off the Guardians, his old team. Line drive down the right field line. Tyrone Taylor is fast runner. It's why you pinch hit him. It's why you pinch run him for Alvarez, right? For a play like this. He's running around third, and Mike Saraball stops him. Saraball got a lot of heat for this, but still, you still got to get the big hit, right? Still got to get the hit. We can talk about what Mike Saraball saw. We could argue and debate whether Tyrone Taylor was going to be thrown out the plate or not on this play. The throw was coming into the second baseman right as Tyrone was rounding the bases. So it would have been a very close play at the plate. But Tyrone's fast. You at least trust him to get there. But it would have been a very close play at the plate. And it was less than 2 outs. If it was with 2 outs, I think Saraball would have sent him. But with 1 out and Soto and Alonso and Jeff McNeil coming up, you want to at least let your big bats, Juan Soto, Alonso, and Jeff McNeil get a chance to drive him in, right? So I get the heat on my Saraball for it. I do. I understand the frustration, especially with the result of the game. But I can understand why he didn't let Taylor go, because it was less than 2 outs. So Soto draws the intentional walk. Now, Pete, he had a 4-hit game. Pete struck out. Pete had a 4-hit game, including a 3-run homer. Struck out. Swinging, wailing on fastballs right down the middle or up and in. Bases loaded, 1 out. All you need is a fly ball. All you need is a fly ball. 1 fly ball, and you win the game. Pete struck out. Struck out. I can't, I know it's hard. I know criticizing Alonso is not ideal for this game overall because he had a 4-hit game, but you got to get the hit. You got to get the timely clutch hit, right? And this has been the Mets' biggest problem all year long. They haven't been able to get the timely clutch big hit, and Pete didn't come through. So he strikes out. Here comes Jeff McNeil. All right, Jeff, you're a batting champion. All you got to do is line drive, right? Just get a line drive to the outfield. It's not able to. It's a little blooper right to the shortstop. That's it. That's it. The Mets waste their best opportunity. Bases loaded, 1 out, with your big bopper first baseman at the plate and a former batting champion, and neither of them were able to get the job done. Neither of them were able to come through and get the game-winning hit. In Pete's case, all you have to do is hit a fly ball. That's all you have to do. But you know what Pete's doing? He's trying to hit a grand slam. Go watch his swings. He's trying to hit a grand slam. There's no need. There's no need to try to hit a grand slam there. Just hit the ball into the out. Just hit the ball in the outfield. There's no need to try to hit a grand slam. Who cares about a grand slam? Just hit the ball in the outfield. But Jeff McNeil in this game, I want to see what were the pitches here? Two pitches. Jeff went swinging the first pitch, foul ball. Next pitch, little line out to the second baseman. Again, with two outs, why are you swinging at everything? With two outs, why are you swinging at everything? Where's the patience? Where's the patience? Pete. I mean, I'm looking at Alonso's chart. Pete saw six pitches. He swung at four of them. Where's the patience? Where's the look for your? Where's the look for your pitch? Where's the patience? Swinging at everything. Where's the pitches? Where's the patience? Jeff McNeil, two pitch at bat. Where's the patience? It's two outs. It's two outs. The patience isn't there with this team. The approach isn't there. Top of the 10th, Ryan Hesley comes in. They intentionally walk Jose Ramirez to make it first and second, nobody out. Understandable, right? Ghost runners on. Jose Ramirez, great hitter. Obviously, it makes sense to walk him. And then Brett Beatty makes a key error, ground ball by Fry. Beatty makes a throwing error. You could argue Lindor could have caught it, but it was not a good throw by Brett Beatty. And it makes it 6-5 Cleveland. RBI base hit by Arias again, makes it 7-5. Brett Beatty does get an RBI single at the bottom of the sixth, and Luis Torrens, it's a fly ball to right field. That came just a little bit close of a walk-off two-run homer. Ended up being a fly out, and that's kind of where you wish you would have had Alvarez in that spot. So you could say Mendoza maybe overplayed his game. He overplayed his hand, overmanaged, but he was going for the win the bottom of the ninth. So I can't blame him that much. But again, a game they should have won because they didn't get the big hit. And it was the same story in the next game when they lose 3-2 to the Cleveland Guardians. Clay Holmes actually gives them a good outing, went 5 innings, 3 hits, 2 earned runs, and a walk. But Tyler Rogers, unfortunately, did give up a run after he had nobody on with 2 outs, which has been a common theme for the Mets recently. I don't know if you guys have noticed or seen, but it's been a couple of, as of late, or at least recently, it's been a lot of times where the Mets pitching, starters or bullpen, not 2 outs and nobody on, and they're not able to get out of the inning. And this happened to Tyler Rogers. I believe, in the top of the seventh. Excuse me. This happened to Tyler Rogers in the top of the seventh. He had 2 outs and nobody on, and then he gives up a base hit to CJ Kafis, gives up a little loop single at the end of the bat by Brian Rocchio. Stephen Kwan gets an RBI single, makes it 3-2. Yeah, he actually hits Sheenan after that, but then he gets Jose Ramirez to ground out. It's, again, been a thing for the Mets pitching as of late, recently. 2 outs and nobody on, they're not able to get out of the inning. Why? It's just one of those it's just one of those weird things that's going wrong with this team, where your pitching gets 2 outs and nobody on, and they're not able to get out of the inning. So when this happened to Tyler Rogers in the top of the seventh, but again, the big story was the offense. 2 runs on 4 hits. That's it. 2 runs on 4 hits. That's it. That was it. That was all the Mets offense could muster up against a guy and Allen who went 5 innings and he has an ERA of 4+. Allen had an ERA of 4+, and you couldn't muster up much of anything because they got 2 earned runs. They did get 2 runs on them, but the rest of the way, the bullpen shut them out. A Guardians bullpen that, because of the game before, should have been right there for the Mets to take advantage of, because the Guardians used a lot of their guys in the bullpen the day before. Should have been right there for the Mets to take advantage and score some runs, but they weren't able to. 4 hits on 2 runs. That's it. That was it. They scored their first 2. They scored 2 runs. They scored 1 run in the bottom of the first, 1 run in the bottom of the second, and got shut out the rest of the way. Shut out the rest of the way. Again, man, how does that kind of stuff happen with an offense that has Starling Marte, Francisco Lindor, Juan Soto, Pete Alonso, Brandon Hill, Mark Vientos, Jeff McNeil, Francisco Alvarez? Cedric Mullins didn't play in this game, but still Cedric Mullins. They did not get a hit. I think the Mets didn't get a hit from the 4th inning to like the 9th, I think, or even the 8th. Let's see. McNeil got a base hit in the bottom of the 4th. And yeah, that was it. That was the last hit the Mets had throughout the rest of the game. And that last hit by Jeff McNeil in the bottom of the fourth would be the only hit this team would have until the bottom of the ninth with one out and Juan Soto homer. Because in the next game, losing 4-1, Gavin Williams goes 8 innings or eight and a third of no hit baseball. The Mets lose the game 4-1. The only run and only hit was by Juan Soto with a solo homer. And that's it. That was the only hit they had. They almost got no hit by Gavin Williams. They almost got no hit by him at home in a playoff push. There is no, again, I know it happens sometimes. We've seen the best lineups in baseball get no hit. I remember the 2003 New York Yankees. Great lineup. They got no hit. They got combined no hit by the Houston Astros. In 2022, as Met fans know, the same year that the Philadelphia Phillies made a run to the World Series, the Mets combined for a no hitter against them. So look, it happens to the best lineups. Of course they do. But there's just no excuse with a lineup with Juan Soto, Francisco Lindor, Pete Alonso, Brandon Nero, Mark Vientos, Jeff McNeil, Cedric Mullins. Again, Alvarez didn't play in this game. He had the off day. He did come in to pinch hit, but still, Francisco Alvarez, there's no reason. And even a young guy like Ronnie Mauricio, or even a first round pick like Brett Beatty, there's no reason for a team with this caliber on offense and these players in their lineup every single day to be almost no hit, especially at this time of year. And there's no reason for them to just look this lethargic, to just look like this and struggle like this with runners in scoring position and be ineffective. The Mets in this series against Cleveland, one hit and four hits in the last two games. One hit and four hits. You know, one hit and four hits in the last two games. It didn't get a hit from the bottom, from the fifth inning of the previous game to the eighth inning. Didn't get a hit to the eighth inning of the next game. Didn't get a hit. They were left with no hits from the bottom of the fifth from the previous day on Tuesday to the bottom of the eighth to the game last night. You know, and Carlos Mendoza spoke to the media yesterday after the game, and he, for the first time, I would say, Carlos Mendoza really was pressed about this offense by the media because you heard it last night from the Citi Field fans who have packed the house all season long, who have gone to the games every single day, and this is exactly what Steve Cohen essentially before the season began was asking Met fans, "Hey guys, you didn't show up much last year, even with the Mets being as hot as they were from June onwards before the postseason, right? From June to the rest of the regular season, fans didn't really show up. It wasn't until the postseason where fans started to show up, but you even saw August, September, as the Mets were playing great baseball and having the best record for that stretch. How many people really went to the games? So during the off season, Steve Cohen, the owner, was telling the fans, "Hey guys, show up to the park. Let's show up to the park. We have a good team here." And credit to the fans, they have shown up every single game. They have packed the house on no matter what day it is. They have packed the house and gone to the games. And last night or yesterday, they really finally showed their frustration. There was a lot of loud boos. There was a lot of loud boos from the Citi Field, from the Met fans at Citi Field yesterday. I think Met fans are finally fed up with this team. They're finally fed up and finally upset, and they're finally done waiting. Because they've been told since the middle of June when they started playing this bad baseball, they've been told, "Hey, don't worry, we'll turn around. Don't worry, we'll turn around. Don't worry, we'll turn around." They haven't turned it around. And every time there's been some glimpse of, oh, they're gonna go back to playing the baseball that they were for the first 2.5 months, whether it was beating the Brewers 2 out of 3, the Yankees 2 out of 3, and going on a 7-game winning streak. Every time they've had those two glimpses and have fallen right back down after that. So, you know, so Met fans are tired. They're fed up. We know Met fans. Met fans are a very impatient bunch. But when they've been told for 2.5 months now, when they've been told for 2.5 months now to wait and be patient, we'll turn this around. And there's still really no sign of them turning it around. You're going to start hearing some boos and start hearing people fed up. And before you know it, they're going to stop going. Before you know it, they'll stop going to the games. And the Mets don't want that, and certainly Steve Cohen doesn't want that. But you really heard it yesterday. You really heard it. They booed loud. They're not happy. They're pissed, or a little. Excuse my language, but They're a little bit ticked off. They're a little bit ticked. This is a team that's not playing good baseball at all. They're playing poor baseball, poor offensive approach, poor starting pitching, and really poor infield defense. Poor infield defense. So, and yesterday, for the first time, really, Carlos Mendoza was really pressed. Finally, pressed about the offense and the way their approach to the plate and how they're handling things. Um, he was finally pressed at his presser at the end of yesterday's game, and he said the number one thing is understanding we're going through it right now, but at the same time, we need to find a way to turn the switch. Well, again, that's the same thing they've been saying uh, for 2 months now. Oh yeah, we'll turn the switch. We'll turn the switch on. We'll turn the switch on. Well, the switch hasn't been turned on yet. And this was the most interesting one right here. This was the most interesting quote from Carlos Mendoza. He says the Mets have struggled to make. He says the Mets have struggled to make. The Mets have struggled. The Mets have struggled to make in-game adjustments offensively. Now, I don't know about you. That's a pretty telling statement. If you're struggling to make in-game adjustments on offense, that's a coaching thing. And then when he was followed up on it, he said, our coaches are working really hard. They continue to have those discussions with the players, but we've got to. So at the same time, he kind of says it that the coaches, that them as coaches are not doing a good job. But then when he's followed up on, he's like, well, yeah, we're working hard. But you pretty much said we got to make in-game adjustments, which is essentially saying it's the coaching. And that's really it right there. It's the coaching. If you guys are not making struggling to make in-game adjustments on offense, then that's on the coaches. I know we could blame the players, and the players, especially at the top of the order, you know, deserve their share of the blame, of course, especially with the top four struggling the way they are. But if you're struggling to make in-game adjustments, that's on the coaches. That's on Mendoza, and that's on your two hitting coaches, Jeremy Barnes and Eric Chavez. That's on the coaches. And look, credit to the New York media for, finally kind of pressing Mendoza on this. This has been a big offensive problem for the Mets really since all season long. All year long, they've had this problem on offense and scoring runs, scoring position, and just looking and just not having good at bats and the approaches being bad. This has been a thing really all year long. And it's August now. This is now the key point of the season here. And you made your trades by getting Gregory Soto, getting Tyler Rogers, getting Ryan Helsley, acquiring Cedric Mullins. By the way, just another thing, Cedric Mullins needs to play center field every single day. I don't care if a lefty is pitching. I don't. Cedric Mullins is played very well against left-handed pitching. Tyrone Taylor cannot. I know Tyrone Taylor got an RBI single a couple of days ago. He did. To his credit, he did. He was actually one of the few guys who scored those two runs the other day. But when they lost 3-2. But even still, Cedric Mullins needs to be playing every single day at center field. I don't care if it's righty or lefty. He needs to be playing every single day at center field. Do not do this part-time stuff between Mullins and Tyrone Taylor. Okay? Please don't do this part-time stuff. You got Cedric Mullins to play starting center field every single day. Let him be the starting everyday center fielder. Please. Please and thank you. Enough with Tyrone Taylor. No offense to Tyrone. I like Tyrone Taylor. He's a good defensive player. He's a he's a good guy in the locker room. Clubhouse loves him. Coaching staff loves him. I think look. I like him. I'm happy, but he is a fourth outfielder who should not be playing every day, and he has really struggled on offense. Really struggled. You got Cedric Mullins to play every single day. He needs to play every single day, lefty or righty. I don't care. He needs to play every single day. But they said, but whatever you're struggling with on the offensive approach in games, then you gotta do better. And that's on the coaching to me. That is on coaching. Because you have the talent. There's just no excuse for the lineup with this amount of caliber talent to be struggling the way they are. And if you have an offense with that caliber talent struggling the way they are, that's on the coaching. Because that's a Juan Soto did not all of a sudden become a guy who bats a buck 70, whatever, with runners in scoring position. Francisco Lindor didn't all of a sudden start batting below a mid 700-ish OPS. Brandon Nimmo didn't all of a sudden start striking out a lot. You know, Jeff McNeil didn't all of a sudden start popping out every at bat. Alvarez with his struggles before he came back from being sent down. Mark Vientos with his struggles before he got hurt and was in the minors. And before he got hurt, and then came back. And he's hit the ball really well. Same with Alvarez. Beatty consistently struggling all the time as a hitter. These guys, this didn't just start. This didn't just start happening. Why? Again, this is on the coaching. Whatever the Mets are teaching, whatever the Mets coaching and their philosophy is, it's clearly not working. And it's been like this, not just this year, but it's been like this for a while now. It's been like this for a while. Even last year, for the first 2 months of the season. It's been like this for a while, or even 2023, or even the second half of 2022, or even, September 2022. And Chavez and Barnes were both there. For both of these instances, for all these instances, Chavez and Barnes were both there. Remember, Chavez and Barnes are not Carlos Mendoza hires. They were from Buck Showalter's time. But the fact that the Mets have not made a change, a hitting coach, the fact that the Mets have not made a change of hitting coaches, which it tells you that they truly feel like they're going to turn this thing around. Well, you better do it now, starting tomorrow. It's August. You're 2.5 out of the division, and now you're now in the third wild card spot. And only, let me double check. As far as I know, they're 3 games up. Yeah, they're now in the third wild card spot, a game behind the Padres for the second wild card spot, and only 3 up on the Reds, who are right there. And remember, they beat you 2 out of 3. And because you've lost the Giants 2 out of 3, the Giants are only 5 games back of you. Look, if the Mets and now the Mets face the Brewers this weekend, the hottest team in all of baseball. Whatever is going on, and Kodai Senga pitched tomorrow for the Mets against Brandon Woodruff, who's pitched really well since coming back from injury. He's 3-0 with a 2.22 ERA. And Senga, of course, as of late, really struggled. But if you want to turn this thing around, man, it's on the coaches. To me, it is on the coaches now. Now that Mendoza said that they're struggling to make in-game adjustments. Now it's on the coach. That tells me it's the coaches. That tells me it's Carlos Mendoza. That tells me it's Eric Chavez, and that tells me it's Jeremy Barnes. Because there's just no way your talent on offense, especially with your top 4, should be struggling like this and not scoring runs in scoring position. I hope yesterday, almost getting no hit, is exactly the wake-up call they needed. And they go out there the rest of the way and start playing offense the way they're capable of playing offense. But it ain't good. But they got the Brewers this weekend, so it ain't gonna get easy. So they're in a bind. They're in a bit of a tough bind here. They're in a bit of a tough bind. And this is a team that all of a sudden they could miss the playoffs. They could. Only 3 up on the Reds. They're only 3 up. That's it. That's it. And if you don't start playing better baseball, 2.5 behind the Phillies could all of a sudden turn 5.5, 6.5, 7.5, just like that. And you'll be battling out for a third wild card spot for the second year in a row. Last year, battling out for third wild card spot. Last year, battling out for that second, third wild card spot, that was an accomplishment in itself, right? Because no one thought they would do that at the beginning of the season. And certainly not when they were 0-5 or 11 games or 0-5 and 11 games under 500 last year. But this year, if you're battling out for that third wildcard spot, that is a massive disappointment. That is a massive disappointment in and of itself. So they're whatever philosophy they're doing, they got to change it. Because they're not going to fire anybody at this point. It's August 7th. It's August 7th. They're not firing anybody. It's like the Yankees. Everyone's saying the Yankees need to fire Aaron Boone. The Yankees aren't firing Aaron Boone, folks. They're not. It's already August. If you were going to make a change, it would have happened in April or May. Or, like the Phillies did a few years ago with Joe Girardi going to to Rob Thompson. But it's August now. No changes in the coaching is gonna is no changes will happen here in August with weeks to go, a month to go now. Weeks to go, whatever. It's on the current coaches now that the Mets have, and yes, it is on the current players. But they are so much better than what they've shown since June 14th or so. Since the day after Senga got hurt in the hamstring. That's when this struggle started. The day after Senga hurt his hamstring. And they got swept by Tampa Bay, and they blew that game on Friday. That game where they were up 5-1 and blew that one. I think it was 5-1 or so, and they blew that one. And then they got blown out the rest of the way by Tampa Bay, and they went on losing 7 in a row. And we thought at the time that was just a blip. We thought, hey, they played so good and we thought, hey, you know, they played so good, you know, all season long at that point, you know, hey, it's just a blip. It happens, you'll lose games, you know, you're not going to be great all season long. It's a long season, 162. We all thought that way. We all felt that way. But boy, it's carried over to August now. It's carried over into early, now going on mid-August. So this isn't just a blip anymore. This is just how they played. And it's bad. It's really bad. And to get swept again by a team that look, Cleveland's playing better baseball. They are. They're playing good baseball, and they're now kind of back in it for the division title for the AL Central, 6 games back now. And you knew they were a good team, overall, because again, they've had plenty of playoff experience. They were just in the LCS last year. But still, there's no excuse to get swept by these guys. There's no excuse to get swept by them. No excuse. And there's certainly no excuse to those 2 out of 3 to the Giants who just sold who just sold. No excuse. It's bad. They got to turn this around. They got to. But it ain't getting easy because Milwaukee, they got to face the red hot Milwaukee Brewers in Milwaukee. As I just said yesterday, Friday, tomorrow night, 8:10 p.m. Tomorrow night, Kodai Senga will face Brandon Woodruff. Boy, Kodai Senga could use a really good start. I mean, the Mets need Senga to have good, but just Kodai Senga himself could use just a really good start. He really could. I think Senga is just on that stretch where he just needs one good start. Look, we haven't seen Kodai Senga struggle like this, right? He was great all of his 2023. Obviously, last year was a wash because of the injuries. Obviously, last year was a wash due to the injuries. But in his one start against the Braves, he was fantastic before he got hurt with the calf. I don't really count the playoff performances. I know he struggled there, but I don't count that because he was still hurt. The Mets, I felt like the Mets are still trying to rush him out there because they felt like they needed him. If it was up to me, I don't think Senga would have pitched at all in the playoffs last year. And then he came back this year and he looked great. I know some may differ because, well, I know some think he wasn't really as good as the numbers said they were. But when I watched him, I thought he was pretty darn good. And then he hurt his hamstring. And since he's come back, aside from that 4 inning start against the Royals right before the All-Star break, it's been a struggle. His command is off. It seems like he's trying to it seems like he's over pitching. He's overthrowing a bit and not really pitching, and he's losing command and control of his forkball. Teams are also, he's leaving the forkball over the middle, which teams are now hitting. I think Senga, look, it happens. So look, great, good. So look, pitchers we've not seen Senga have a stretch like this. So I just think he needs to have one good outing to get back into the groove, to get back into things. So hopefully it's tomorrow night, but it's going to be tough against the Milwaukee Brewers. But Senga really needs a good start. He really needs a good start. And the Mets could certainly use him to have a good start. Saturday will be interesting. So the Milwaukee Brewers are throwing in Henderson. He pitches Logan Henderson. He's pitching great at 3-0 with a 1.78 ERA. But Saturday, because Frankie Montez has struggled so much, the Mets are going to use an opener in this game and have Montez kind of come out. I think that's what the Mets said. The Mets are going to use an opener for this game and then have Frankie Montez come out of the bullpen. And again, this was not something you envisioned when the Mets signed Frankie Montez in the offseason. This was not something you envisioned. It's not something you wanted. Who will be that opener? I don't know. You could always call up Nolan McLean, Brandon Sproat, maybe if you want. Obviously, the Mets see, that's another topic we need to talk about. At one point, do you consider, uh, at what point do you consider calling up Sproat and McLean? We obviously know they're not going to call up Jonah Tong because they don't want him to. They don't want to call him up straight from Double A, which I understand. I understand that, and I agree with that. But at what point do you do you start to think about calling those guys up? At what point do you think about calling those guys up, or one of them, or both? Two or one or both. At what point do you consider calling one of them up? What point do you consider it? Is it Sproat? Is it McLean? Is it Sproat and McLean? Is it both of them? Who is it? At what point do you have to think about calling one of those guys up? You have to think about it. I know the Mets may not prefer to call them up, but the way your starting pitching is with Holmes in his innings and Montez struggling, they could really use a jolt right now. They could really use a jolt. And Sproat and McLean, or Sproat or McLean, could I think provide that kind of spark. But it's tough because it's August. We're going in September soon, but it's August. It's a playoff push, so yeah, it's a tough situation. But you didn't get a starting pitcher because you didn't feel the value was there. But you didn't feel the value because you didn't feel like the value was there. Getting a starting pitcher. You didn't get a starter. You might have to call one. You might have to call those guys up. You might have to call Syracuse and talk about McLean and Sproat. So, but that Saturday start looks like it'll be an opener. Montez coming out of the bullpen or such. Maybe Montez opens for a couple of innings and they go to the bullpen. So that'll be interesting to watch. Sunday, Sean and I will pitch against the 11-game winner of the Milwaukee Brewers, the 11-game winner of the Milwaukee Brewers, Quinn Priester. So it's a tough series. And after that, the Mets will then come home to face the Braves for 3 games before they play the Seattle Mariners next weekend at home. Actually, no, excuse me, next weekend at home, Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday they'll be doing the Little League Classic at Williamsport. That's pretty cool. I always, the Little League World Series is going on currently right now, so that's pretty cool. I actually forgot that the Mets were playing in the Little League World Series, the Little League Classic games. That's really cool. But look, this is a big stretch for the Mets, and before you know it, they're going to be playing the Philadelphia Phillies soon. Before you know it, they'll be playing the Phillies. And that's going to be a huge series. And currently, the Mets sit 2.5 games back with the Philadelphia Phillies. Speaking of the Phillies, this weekend, the Phillies will be playing the Texas Rangers in Texas. So they got a tough series as well. They'll be going to Texas to play the Rangers while the Mets go to Milwaukee. So both teams will be in for tough series this weekend. So, but the Mets can't worry about the Phillies right now. You got to worry about your own business. You got to start winning baseball games. Forget about the Phillies for a second, right? Bottom line, you got to handle your own business. You got to start winning games. This team has not won games at all since mid-June. This was a team that was 21 games over 500 at one point. 21 games over. They now sit just 11. They now sit just 11. And hey, now they face Milwaukee. They could be 9 games now. Hey, they face Milwaukee. So, but they sit 11 games over 500 now. So, this is where things are going to get tested from not just the players, but the managers and the coaching staff. But the manager, the coaching staff, the general manager, the owner, things will now get tested. Playoff stretch, struggling, you know. So this is where this team needs to start playing their best baseball. I said it on the show a week or so ago before this series, but before these last 2 series, but I'll say it again. I'll say it again. They need to start playing. I'll say it again. They need to start playing better baseball. That's just the bottom line. That's just how it is. They are not playing good baseball. And they got to turn this around quick, very quickly. Tomorrow, Mazza Ravens will be on. Actually, the Ravens preseason game is about to kick off now. Their preseason opener against the Indianapolis Colts. Obviously, no starters will be playing this game. You'll see a lot of the Ravens backups. Cooper Rush will get the start today. But you'll see a lot of. I'll be interested to watch today Malachi Starks and some of those guys playing. So yeah, it's 7 o'clock now. We're all close to 7 o'clock now. The Ravens will be kicking off their preseason opener. Tomorrow we'll do Mazza on Ravens to recap the game and talk about the game and and see and give you guys my well, what I saw from the game itself and who stood out to me and all that stuff. It's good to have Ravens football back, and Jets football. Mazon Jets will be live on Sunday because to recap the Jets preseason opener against the Green Bay Packers. So football is back. We got the Mets in the middle of a playoff race, and they're trying to turn their season around. And football is back. Preseason football is kicking off this weekend. Well, Fish technically kicked off last week with the Hall of Fame game, but for full slates, but for the full games, it kicks off this weekend. So Mazza Ravens tomorrow, and then Mazza Jets over the weekend after their preseason game against the Packers. So that'll be it for today's episode of MazzaOnMets. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please give this video a like, share, and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate that. We will be back for more MazzaOnMets on Monday to recap their series with the Milwaukee Brewers and to preview their series with the Atlanta Braves. Thank you guys so much. Have yourselves a great day. Have yourselves a good weekend. And let's go Mets.